We are in a simulation. Or at least that's what it feels like the moment you experience something so bizarre, so impossible that it's as if reality itself glitches for a split second. Millions point to these everyday anomalies as proof we're living inside a programmed world. But the truth behind them is far more shocking than anything the Matrix ever hinted at. People across the world report unsettling experiences that seem to break the rules of reality. Déjà vu strikes without warning, making you swear you've lived this exact moment before. The Mandela effect convinces thousands they remember the same false detail about history. Synchronicities pile up until coincidence feels impossible. These glitches in the Matrix have become viral evidence for simulation theory. The idea that our entire existence is just sophisticated code running on some advanced civilization's computer. Philosophers like Nick Bostrom argued that if humanity survives long enough to create realistic simulations, we're statistically more likely to be living inside one than in base reality. Quantum mechanics adds fuel to the fire with particles that only seem to exist when we observe them, like a video game rendering only what the player can see. The logic sounds airtight. The evidence feels overwhelming. Millions are convinced. But here's where it gets interesting. Every single one of these so-called glitches has a perfectly mundane explanation rooted in how your brain actually works. And understanding the real science reveals something far more unsettling about the nature of human consciousness than any simulation hypothesis ever could. Let's start with déjà vu, that eerie sensation that you've experienced this exact moment before. It feels supernatural, like a crack in the code of reality. In simulation theory circles, déjà vu is treated as smoking gun evidence that the program running our world occasionally stutters or repeats itself. The feeling is so visceral, so convincing, that dismissing it as mere brain malfunction seems absurd. But neuroscientists using functional MRI scans discovered what's really happening, and it's both simpler and stranger than a glitch. When déjà vu occurs, the medial prefrontal cortex lights up. This is the brain region responsible for resolving conflicts between what you remember experiencing and what you actually experienced. Essentially, your brain is catching itself in the act of making a mistake. Memory doesn't work like a video recording that plays back perfectly. Instead, your brain reconstructs memories on the fly, piecing together fragments of sensory data, emotions, and context. Sometimes the wiring crosses. A new experience triggers neural pathways similar to an old memory, and for a split second, your brain tags the present moment as a memory from the past. The medial prefrontal cortex then kicks in to flag this error, creating that uncanny feeling of familiarity mixed with impossibility. You're not experiencing a repeated simulation loop. You re-experiencing your brain's quality control system, alerting you to a memory reconstruction error in real time. Now this is where researchers were stunned. Studies on temporal lobe epilepsy revealed that people with certain types of seizures experience intense, chronic déjà vu because of abnormal electrical signaling in the hippocampus and temporal lobe, the exact regions that process memory. This isn't a glitch in external reality. It's a glitch in the internal architecture of human cognition. The fact that we can trigger déjà vu artificially through brain stimulation proves it's a biological phenomenon, not evidence of simulated reality. But here's the twist almost everyone gets wrong. The reason déjà vu feels so profound isn't because reality is breaking down. It's because your conscious experience of reality is already a constructed illusion created by your brain. And occasionally, you get a glimpse behind the curtain of that construction process. That's genuinely unsettling, but not for the reasons simulation theorists claim. The Mandela effect takes this brain-based explanation even further. Thousands of people insist they remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, or that the Berenstain Bears were spelled Berenstein, or that Darth Vader said Luke, "I am your father," instead of "No, I am your father." When masses of people share identical false memories, it feels impossible to dismiss as individual error. Surely this is proof that reality has been altered, that we've shifted between parallel dimensions, or that the simulation has been updated and left behind residual code errors in our collective memory. But this is the part most people never hear. False memories aren't rare glitches. Cognitive psychologists have studied this for decades. Your hippocampus, the brain structure that stores memory, is the same region responsible for imagination. When you remember something, your brain doesn't retrieve a file. It reconstructs an approximation based on fragments, then fills in missing details with what seems plausible. This process is called confabulation, and it happens constantly without you realizing it. Even more fascinating, memory is highly suggestible. When you encounter information after an event, your brain can seamlessly weave that new data into the original memory, rewriting history in your own mind. The name looks wrong because our brains expect Stein as a common ending. We autocorrect it mentally, then remember our autocorrection instead of the actual spelling. Repeat this error across millions of people exposed to the same linguistic pattern, and you've got a false collective memory that feels like reality has shifted. Here's where it gets interesting. Synchronicity, the experience of meaningful coincidences, might be the most compelling evidence people cite for living in a simulation. You think of someone and they call. You need information and stumble upon it randomly. Numbers repeat everywhere you look. Psychologist Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe these causal connecting principles, events linked by meaning rather than cause and effect. But cognitive scientists who studied synchronicity experiences found something remarkable. Humans are pattern recognition machines. Your brain evolved to detect threats and opportunities by identifying patterns and noise. This survival mechanism creates a powerful side effect. You notice patterns even when they're random. Probability theory shows that in a complex world with billions of events happening constantly, unlikely coincidences are statistically guaranteed to occur. You just notice the hits and forget the misses. This is called confirmation bias. You remember the one time you thought of someone and they called, but forget the 1,000 times you thought of someone and nothing happened. Your brain weights the meaningful coincidence heavily because it triggers emotional and cognitive significance while dismissing the non-events as irrelevant. Layer in the availability heuristic, where recent or emotionally charged events feel more probable than they are, and you've got the psychological recipe for perceiving patterns that don't exist. But here's the part most people miss. In quantum mechanics, observation doesn't mean a conscious being looking at something. It means any interaction with another system that causes decoherence. A photon hitting an electron counts as observation. No consciousness required. The universe isn't waiting for human awareness to render reality. Quantum mechanics describes the probabilistic nature of particles at subatomic scales, not evidence of programmed reality. Physicists have searched for signs that space-time has a pixelated structure at the Planck scale, which would suggest we're living in a discrete, computed universe. Now, so far, every test shows space-time is smooth and continuous, exactly the opposite of what simulation theory predicts. The universe doesn't behave like it's running on a computer. It behaves like it's made of quantum fields, evolving according to mathematical laws we're still trying to fully understand. Now this is where the myth completely collapses. The actual evidence people cite for simulation theory is evidence for how limited and flawed human perception and memory are. Your brain constructs a model of reality from incomplete sensory data. It fills gaps with assumptions. It rewrites memories. It detects patterns in randomness. It mistakes internal cognitive errors for external anomalies. Every glitch in the matrix is really a glitch in the biological machinery generating your subjective experience. That's not less profound than living in a simulation. It's arguably more profound. Your entire conscious experience of reality is already a kind of virtual reality, a constructed model that only approximates the external world. You never experience reality directly. You experience your brain's best guess about reality based on limited, noisy input. Déjà vu, false memories, and synchronicities aren't glitches in a computer simulation. They're glitches in the biological simulation your brain runs constantly to create the illusion of a coherent, continuous reality. The real question isn't whether we live in a simulation. It's whether the distinction between simulated and real even matters when consciousness itself is fundamentally a constructed experience. That's the truth the glitches reveal, and it's far more unsettling than any matrix theory could ever be. What myth should I break down next?